Single dad denied a room in his own hotel. Staff fired on the spot. The exhausted single father tightened his grip on the bouquet of red roses while his little daughter slept peacefully on his shoulder, clutching her worn teddy bear. He had spent years building a luxury hotel empire from nothing, yet on this rainy evening, standing in the lobby of his flagship hotel, the receptionist looked him up and down and coldly declared that people like him didn't belong there. She refused to give him a room, never realizing she was denying the owner of the hotel itself. What happened over the next hour would change every employee's life forever. Before we continue, if you believe kindness always comes back, second chances can change lives. And true character is worth more than appearances. Please take a second to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone you care about, and subscribe to Bright Heart. Your support helps us continue bringing powerful stories that touch millions of hearts. The rain had started before sunset and only grew heavier as darkness covered the city. Water streamed down the enormous glass windows of the Grand Meridian Hotel, one of the most luxurious destinations in the country. Expensive cars lined the entrance, while uniformed valets rushed from one vehicle to another beneath large umbrellas. Wealthy guests entered wearing elegant suits and sparkling dresses. Laughing as they escaped the storm into the warmth of the marble lobby, across the street, a tired man slowly crossed the road, carrying a sleeping 7-year-old girl on his back. His leather jacket was soaked. His shoes were covered in mud from a long day of traveling, and the backpack hanging from his shoulder looked worn from years of use. In one hand, he carefully held a bouquet of fresh red roses wrapped in simple paper, making sure not to let the rain damage them. His name was Daniel Carter. Most people who passed him saw nothing more than another exhausted father struggling through life. None of them could have imagined that Daniel owned dozens of luxury hotels across the country, including the magnificent building standing right in front of him. Daniel rarely visited his hotels without announcing himself. Years earlier, he had made a promise to his late wife that success would never blind him from reality. Instead of arriving in expensive cars surrounded by executives, he often traveled alone, dressed simply, wanting to see how ordinary guests and employees were truly treated. The little girl sleeping on his shoulder was his entire world. Her name was Lily. 3 years earlier, Daniel's wife Emma had lost her battle with a sudden illness that no amount of money could stop. Daniel had watched the strongest woman he had ever known slowly fade away while holding his hand and asking him to make only one promise. Never let Lily grow up believing money makes someone important. That promise became the foundation of everything Daniel did afterward. Despite owning $1 billion business, Daniel personally attended every school event, cooked breakfast every morning, packed lunches, read bedtime stories, and never hired a nanny. His daughter didn't know much about luxury or wealth. She simply knew her father loved her more than anything. Every year on Emma's birthday, they visited her favorite hotel together, the Grand Meridian. It had been the very first property Daniel and Emma bought after taking enormous risks with every dollar they owned. Emma had planted the roses that now decorated the hotel's gardens. She believed flowers made strangers smile even on their worst days. That was why Daniel carried roses every year, not for decoration, for remembrance. Tonight would have been Emma's 38th birthday. Daniel planned nothing extravagant. He simply wanted one quiet room overlooking the garden where he and Lily could place the roses beneath Emma's favorite tree the following morning. As he approached the entrance, one of the younger bellboys immediately noticed him struggling with Lily. Without hesitation, the teenager hurried forward. He smiled warmly before carefully opening the large glass doors. Daniel thanked him with genuine appreciation. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness mattered the most. Inside, the warmth of the hotel surrounded them instantly. Crystal chandeliers illuminated the enormous marble floor, while soft piano music echoed through the elegant lobby. Lily stirred slightly on his shoulder. Daniel gently adjusted the blanket around her before walking toward the reception desk. Behind it stood a perfectly dressed young receptionist named Diana. Everything about her appearance reflected professionalism. Everything except the expression on her face. The moment she looked at Daniel, her polite smile disappeared. Her eyes immediately focused on his muddy shoes, damp jacket, old backpack, and tired face. Without asking how she could help, she simply waited. Daniel smiled politely. He explained that he would like one room for the night, a quiet room overlooking the garden if one was available. Diana typed slowly before glancing back up. Instead of checking availability, she asked whether he had a reservation. Daniel admitted he did not. He explained that unexpected travel delays had changed their plans. She sighed dramatically. Her fingers stopped moving across the keyboard. Although dozens of room keys hung neatly behind her, she informed him the hotel was completely booked. Daniel nodded respectfully. Years of business had taught him never to argue. He thanked her anyway and prepared to leave. Then something happened. A wealthy businessman entered the lobby with 2 assistants. Without a reservation, without waiting. Diana's entire attitude changed instantly. Her face brightened with excitement. Within seconds, she found him the finest suite available. Daniel quietly watched from a distance. The hotel wasn't full after all. It had simply been full for people who looked like him. Lily slowly opened her sleepy eyes. She whispered that she was cold. Daniel forced a smile despite the ache in his heart. He wrapped his jacket tighter around her tiny shoulders. For just one brief moment, he wasn't thinking like the owner of a hotel empire. He was simply a father trying to find warmth for his daughter. As he turned toward the exit, an elderly housekeeper pushing a cleaning cart happened to notice, Lily shivering. The woman quietly approached. She removed her own knitted shawl and gently wrapped it around the little girl without expecting anything in return. Daniel's eyes filled with gratitude. The housekeeper smiled softly. She reminded him of Emma. Kindness never needed permission, but Diana saw the interaction. Instead of appreciating the gesture, she scolded the elderly employee in front of everyone, insisting hotel property and uniforms were not meant for helping people who weren't guests. The housekeeper lowered her eyes in embarrassment. Daniel felt something break inside him. Not because he had been denied a room, not because of the disrespect shown toward him, but because someone with such compassion had been humiliated for showing humanity. He looked around the magnificent lobby. Guests admired expensive artwork. Executives discussed million-dollar contracts. Fresh flowers filled crystal vases. Yet somehow compassion had become the rarest luxury in the building. Daniel gently kissed Lily's forehead. He knew exactly what he had to do. But he wouldn't act in anger. He would reveal the truth only after seeing how deep the problem truly went. Because a business could survive financial losses. It could survive competition. It could survive economic hardship. But the moment kindness disappeared, the soul of the company began to die. Daniel quietly stepped away from the reception desk and took out his phone. One simple call would soon shake the entire hotel from top to bottom. The truth begins to unfold. Daniel slipped his phone back into his pocket without making the call immediately. Years of building his company had taught him one lesson above all others. The real character of an organization was never revealed during inspections or scheduled visits. It appeared only when employees believed no one important was watching. If he revealed himself now, Diana would instantly change her attitude, apologize, and everyone would pretend nothing had happened. That would solve nothing. The real problem would remain hidden beneath polished smiles and expensive uniforms. Outside, the rain continued to pour. The cold wind pushed against Daniel as he carried Lily toward one of the benches near the entrance. She was still half asleep, her tiny arms wrapped around the teddy bear that Emma had bought her before she passed away. Daniel gently rubbed his daughter's back. trying to keep her warm beneath the elderly housekeeper's knitted shawl. The old housekeeper quietly stepped outside a few minutes later. Looking around to make sure no supervisor was watching, she carried 2 steaming cups in her hands. One contained hot chocolate for Lily, the other hot coffee for Daniel. She apologized softly, explaining that she had paid for them herself because she hated seeing a child shiver in the rain. Daniel accepted the drinks with sincere gratitude. For a few moments they simply sat beneath the covered entrance, listening to the rain strike the pavement. The elderly woman introduced herself as Margaret. She had worked at the Grand Meridian for almost 24 years. She remembered the hotel's opening day, remembered planting flowers in the gardens, and remembered a kind young couple who dreamed of creating a hotel where every guest would feel like family. Daniel's heart tightened. She was talking about him and Emma. Margaret didn't recognize him after all these years. Time had changed both of them. Daniel now wore a beard, carried years of grief on his face, and dressed like an ordinary traveler instead of a businessman. Margaret smiled sadly as she admitted the hotel wasn't the same anymore. The new management cared more about appearances than people. Employees were constantly reminded to give special treatment only to wealthy-looking guests. Anyone who appeared poor was quietly discouraged from staying because management believed it damaged the hotel's image. Every word struck Daniel harder than the last. This wasn't the company he had built. Emma had once written the hotel's mission statement herself. It was framed inside every staff office. Every guest deserves dignity before luxury. Somewhere along the way, those words had become decoration instead of a promise. Just then, another family hurried toward the entrance. Their car had broken down during the storm. A young mother carried a crying baby while her husband struggled with several bags. They looked tired but respectable. Before they even reached the reception desk, Diana welcomed them with a bright smile because they arrived in an expensive SUV that had been towed to the entrance. Within minutes, they were checked into a premium suite. Daniel wasn't upset that they received good service. He was upset because everyone deserved the same respect. As the evening grew darker, Lily finally woke completely. She looked at her father with innocent eyes and asked whether they would be sleeping outside tonight. Daniel forced another smile. He told her everything would be okay. She believed him without hesitation. Children have an incredible ability to trust the people they love, even when those people are carrying impossible burdens. Lily reached into her small backpack and carefully removed a folded birthday card she had spent an entire week making for her mother. It was decorated with colorful hearts, tiny flowers, and a family drawing that showed Emma smiling beneath a bright blue sky. She asked if Mommy would still see the card. Daniel swallowed the lump in his throat. He gently kissed the top of her head and assured her that love always finds its way to heaven. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The rain continued falling. Inside the hotel, laughter echoed through elegant hallways, while expensive dinners were served beneath sparkling chandeliers. Outside, the man who owned everything sat quietly beside his daughter, wondering how his company had forgotten the values upon which it had been built. Then something unexpected happened. The young bellboy who had opened the door earlier walked outside carrying a small blanket and a box of cookies from the hotel kitchen. He nervously admitted he could get into trouble if anyone discovered what he was doing, but he couldn't bear seeing Lily cold and hungry. Daniel accepted the blanket with heartfelt thanks. The teenager smiled shyly before returning inside. Daniel noticed something remarkable. The lowest-paid employees were showing the greatest kindness. The problem wasn't the hearts of ordinary workers. The problem was leadership. He finally looked at his watch. It was nearly 9 o'clock. Enough was enough. He unlocked his phone and scrolled to a number that very few people possessed. It belonged to Jonathan Reed. Jonathan wasn't just the regional director. He had helped Daniel build the company from the very beginning, and knew every hotel inside and out, Daniel pressed the call button. Jonathan answered almost immediately. After hearing only a few sentences, his cheerful voice disappeared completely. Within seconds, he understood exactly what had happened. Daniel calmly instructed him not to warn anyone, no phone calls, no messages, no advance notice. He wanted everyone exactly as they were. Jonathan promised he would arrive personally. He estimated 45 minutes. Daniel thanked him and ended the call. Inside the hotel, life continued normally. No one realized that one phone call had already set extraordinary events into motion. Back at the reception desk, Diana laughed with another employee while glancing occasionally toward Daniel through the glass doors. She seemed convinced he would eventually leave. Instead, Daniel remained seated quietly beside Lily. He wasn't waiting for revenge. He was waiting for truth. Because when leadership ignored compassion, consequences eventually followed. And before the night was over, every employee in the Grand Meridian Hotel would discover exactly who the tired single father carrying a bouquet of roses truly was. The owner walks back into his own hotel. Daniel ended the call and slipped his phone into his jacket. Nothing about his expression changed. He wasn't interested in making a scene or embarrassing anyone in front of guests. Years ago, Emma had taught him that anger could expose a problem, but only wisdom could truly fix it. Tonight, he intended to discover whether the Grand Meridian had merely lost its way, or whether it had forgotten its soul completely. The rain finally began to slow, leaving the hotel's glass entrance covered with shimmering droplets that reflected the bright lobby lights. Lily had fallen asleep once again against her father's shoulder, wrapped in Margaret's knitted shawl and the blanket the young bellboy had secretly brought outside. Daniel looked down at his daughter and gently brushed a strand of hair from her face. Even after the long journey, she still held the handmade birthday card for her mother tightly against her chest. Inside the lobby, Diana glanced toward the entrance again and frowned. She couldn't understand why the exhausted father refused to leave. Every few minutes, she whispered something to another receptionist, and both laughed quietly before returning to their work. To them, Daniel was simply another traveler who couldn't afford a luxury hotel. About 40 minutes later, the peaceful atmosphere changed. A line of black executive SUVs quietly pulled up outside the hotel. One after another, they stopped beneath the entrance canopy. Valets rushed forward, assuming wealthy investors or government officials had arrived. The hotel manager, Victor Langford, happened to be reviewing reports in his office when security informed him that Regional Director Jonathan Reed had unexpectedly arrived without any scheduled visit. Victor froze. Jonathan almost never visited without notice. Within seconds, Victor hurried into the lobby, nervously adjusting his tie while instructing employees to stand straight and smile. Deanna quickly fixed her uniform, believing an important VIP guest must be arriving. The glass doors opened. Jonathan Reed stepped inside, followed by several senior executives from the company's headquarters. The entire lobby instantly became silent. Every employee recognized him. Victor rushed forward wearing his brightest smile. He stretched out his hand, eager to welcome the executive. But Jonathan walked straight past him without even slowing down. His face remained unusually serious. Confused employees watched as Jonathan continued toward the entrance instead of the reception desk. Then everyone saw him stop, not beside a celebrity, not beside a billionaire, not beside a politician. He stopped in front of the tired single father sitting quietly with his sleeping daughter. Without hesitation, Jonathan lowered his head respectfully. "Good evening, sir." The words echoed through the silent lobby. Victor's smile disappeared. Deanna's face turned completely pale. The bellboys exchanged shocked glances. Even the guests looked up from their conversations. Jonathan gently looked at Lily sleeping peacefully before turning back toward Daniel. "I'm sorry we're late." Daniel simply nodded. He carefully stood, making sure not to wake his daughter. The bouquet of roses remained in his hand. For several long seconds, nobody understood what was happening. Then Jonathan turned toward the staff. His voice was calm but firm. "I would like everyone present to know that this is Mr. Daniel Carter." He paused. "The founder and owner of Carter Hospitality Group." The silence that followed felt endless. A wine glass slipped from a guest's hand and shattered against the marble floor. One receptionist covered her mouth in disbelief. Victor staggered backward as though the floor beneath him had disappeared. Diana's hands began trembling uncontrollably. She remembered every cold glance, every dismissive word, every assumption she had made based solely on Daniel's appearance. None of it could be taken back. Daniel slowly walked into the lobby carrying Lily in his arms. No anger appeared on his face, no pride, only disappointment. He looked around at the magnificent building he and Emma had once dreamed about creating. The marble floors, the crystal chandeliers, the fresh flowers. Everything looked exactly as it had years ago. Everything except the spirit of the people inside. Daniel quietly thanked Margaret for her kindness. The elderly housekeeper immediately became emotional. Only now did she recognize the young man she had met more than 2 decades earlier on opening day. Tears filled her eyes as she remembered planting roses beside Emma in the hotel gardens. Daniel gently hugged her. The employees watched in complete silence. He then turned toward the young bellboy. The nervous teenager looked terrified, assuming he had broken company rules by helping a stranger. Instead, Daniel smiled warmly. He thanked him for proving that kindness still lived inside the Grand Meridian. The young man's eyes filled with tears of relief. Daniel slowly faced Victor. The hotel manager attempted to apologize immediately, blaming misunderstandings, staff shortages, busy schedules, and communication problems. Daniel quietly raised one hand. Victor stopped speaking. Excuses would not erase what had happened. Daniel looked across the entire reception team before speaking calmly. He explained that he had not come to test luxury. He had come to test humanity. A hotel could always renovate its rooms. It could replace furniture. It could earn more money. But once compassion disappeared, no amount of luxury could repair its reputation. Every employee lowered their eyes. Daniel then walked to the reception counter where Diana stood frozen. She could barely breathe. She whispered that she was deeply sorry. Daniel looked at her for several moments. He didn't ask whether she knew who he was. That wasn't the point. Instead, he asked himself one painful question. Would she have treated any ordinary father differently tomorrow? The answer was already obvious, and that realization